under early childhood education, there were 4 targets, and only one of these was, achieved, while 3 were not achieved. The target, for instance, to inspect 1,000 ECE centers and to deploy 2,000 ECE teachers were not met due to, funding. And also the deployment of 400 teachers of inclusive education did not happen as well because of the lack of funding. So we see that here we recommend that there is need for the country to begin prioritizing the need of learners with special education needs by ensuring that they meet the targets, because the target here was met only by 25% out of the 4 targets that were targeted. Then when we go to primary education, we see that there were 5 targets, of which 3 were met, for the indicators mainly to deploy 3,000 primary school teachers and 875 primary school teachers qualified to teach LOCEN. However, the failure to meet the targets of deploying primary school teachers and teachers qualified to teach learners with special education needs amid free education policy, has led to, overcrowding, and, it reduces the teacher-pupil, interaction. So it should be noted that the attrition rate actually currently, or the loss of teachers due to due to promotion to management positions, and due to also death, is around 7,000 per year that they have to replace. Of course, that is not part of the budget, so the budget is already there. All they need is to replace, but this is also high. So sorry, so we need to replace at that level, but in addition we need to, if we are to increase, we need also to deploy more teachers, and this should be teachers that fit in our inclusive policy on education, meaning they should be able to handle learners with special education needs. In terms of inclusive education, of course, out of the 4 targets, under these 2 were met. 1 was not met, while the target to improve the enrollment rates to 100% at primary school level, providing LOCEN for both girls and boys, was partially met, as 85% of the females and 7% of the males enrollment rates were recorded. The target of having 48% net enrollment was also exceeded, in the sense we achieved 68% for females and 6% for males in terms of net enrollments for 2024. But the target to identify 10,000 learners with disabilities to develop inclusive education system was not achieved, as only 2,000 were identified. So what we are saying here is that Ministry of Education, in collaboration with civil society and working with learners with special education needs in all provinces, need to come up with a robust sensitization plan on the importance of taking learners with special education needs to school. We do realize, honorable members of parliament, that we have a lot of children that have disabilities that are not going to school because their parents really are hiding these children and they don't want them to go to school. And this is uncalled for, given the fact that we are operating on a free education policy currently. In terms of adult literacy, of course, this had 11 targets, and 4 were achieved and 2 were partially met, while 5 were not achieved. The overachievement, for instance, enrollment rates, indicates the thirst for education by our adult learners, and we need to realize that this becomes very important, because when the adults appreciate education, they will also send their children to school. And the current 0.02% that is allocated to youth, adult literacy and education sector needs to be increased at least to 0.04 to meet the international standard, and this will help us address some of the targets that are in the plan. In terms of curriculum review, the section had 5 targets, 3 were achieved, although under the curriculum, as we know, not much was actually targeted in the plan. But the target to review, for instance, 55% of the curriculum at TVET level was, achieved 30% review. The target to improve pupils to textbook ratio, of course, did not improve. It was at 5.1, but it remained at 9.1. Here we recommend that free education policy needs to promote access to education for all. However, there is need for government to channel resources to the education sector to help the provision of inputs of quality in the sector, such as, textbooks as well. Then in terms of infrastructure development, this is where there is a very sad story. As you know, with increase in learners in schools, we expect that we should be expanding the infrastructure at the same rates. But what we see here is that most of the targets were not met, actually. When we talk about the school class and under the World Bank main program, which is around $230 million US, we see that we learn that with sadness that most targets under infrastructure development were not met, except few targets that were met. This is sad given we have the resources with us, and what is working here is basically what would call, lack of commitment to expand the implementation of the targeted infrastructure under the World Bank program, which is the ZIP, Zambia Enhancing the Zambia Education program. Then in terms of menstrual hygiene, we are excited that all the targets were met. We have seen, of course, increased release. This money actually is released very early in the year to the schools to be able to buy the sanitary towels and be able to give the girls to use that. But of course, the problem is that it's only for vulnerable learners. What we want this menstrual hygiene support to cover is for every adolescent who may have an emergency and they don't have resources, even if they're well-to-do. They need to be supported for that period as they are trying to get themselves the necessary support. Then when we talk about improving technical and vocational entrepreneurship skills, we see that under internship and apprenticeship, this part had two targets. One was overachieved and the other partially. In terms of 20 training institutions were involved in work-based learning from a target of 37 institutions that were supposed to be involved. 39 companies involved in work-based learning from a target of 20. And this was very good. Internship actually is what we need to invest in for our learners, experience, as part of their learning, which is very critical for industry. So the government should therefore encourage other partners and private sector to come on board to support TVET in implementing work-based learning activities to produce human capital with practical skills and knowledge to provide solutions required on the labor market. And this really is something we cannot overemphasize, because as they move from this practical experience, they are also motivated to be able to self-employ, which is very, very key. In terms of infrastructure development in TVET, the report highlights that TVET had a target of rehabilitating 10% of the classrooms, 10% of lecturers' houses, and 10% of boarding facilities or bed spaces, and 10% of workshops. Of course, 25% of laboratories as well. But we are saddened to note that all the targets were not met because of limited resources. And sometimes when we are planning, and this is very important to state, when we are planning, really, we need not, forget about the aspect of generating the resources required for us to implement. This is something that we need to, a risk that we can anticipate, and whose mitigation measure we are supposed to also anticipate at planning level. But to plan for all these targets and say they were not made because of money really does not inspire progress or innovation. Then in terms of higher education, we had, of course, under human resource, we can say there were 3 targets that were met, and these are targets to recruit 116 university lecturers, and 116 were recruited. To recruit 60 TVET lecturers, 89 were recruited, and the target to have 20,000 accessing loans and bursaries was met and exceeded as 36,176 students access the loan and bursary facility in 2024. And this becomes very, very important because then, as you know, we are now having more grade 12s that are graduating as a result of free education for vulnerable, learners at that level. So we need to prepare adequately to be able to support larger numbers in higher, in tertiary education because of the impact of or the positive impact of free education. There is, however, a need for the government to increase funding towards loan scholarships so that access to higher education loans can also be rolled out to students in private universities, since they are also citizens. So it doesn't change someone if they go to a private. I know members of parliament, you threw a motion for supporting private universities with scholarships or loans. Curriculum development at this 40 curricula, but only 10 curricula were reviewed. As you know, we have reviewed the curriculum from ECE to secondary. Now we need to have this also reviewed at higher level so that we can have this alignment. Otherwise, we will not benefit from the progressive curriculum we are implementing at ECE to grade 12. Then in terms of enhancing science and technology, in terms of research and development, there were 2 targets here. 40 males and 26 female scientists were trained at master's level from the target of 33, which was good, while 39 males and 33 female scientists were trained at the directorate level from a target of 20 males and 12 female scientists. So despite meeting the targets for training scientists, there's need for continuous support in this area, especially when you talk about the overall support to lower levels as well for STEM or science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. In terms of curriculum development, of course, maybe this we can leave. Industrial linkage promotions. At the higher level, the program had 1 target, which was to hold 1 science, technology, and innovation fair, and this was not met because it was not held. So we need these fairs really, where we bring industry and the learners so that they can have an appreciation of the expectations of industry from the skills that they are getting. So these regular job fairs in higher learning institutions should be held by various industries and companies. And ZANEC has noted that this target has not been achieved for consecutive years from 2023 and 2024. I know those from Western Province know that there is a saying that if you are going somewhere and you fall in a ditch, and on your way back you also fall in a ditch, then there is something wrong. So we should have learned that the first year, if there was a problem with money, keeping it in the following year should have been accompanied with measures to raise the resources required to be able to address the problem. Digital skills development, of course, there were 3 targets, 2 were met. A target to establish 6 centers of excellency at ECE, and 2 at TVET, and all the other targets on digital skills development were met, and this is good. I think we are doing relatively well in terms of digitizing our education system, in terms of ensuring that we apply ICT skills in both the delivery and training of our our learners and teachers. There's also need to incorporate an inclusive digital skills training course in the teacher education curriculum to ensure learners, regardless of their abilities, are well prepared. And this is important, that computer or digital skills should be part and parcel of every teacher, whether you are teaching a local language or what, that has to be accomplished. So let me look at the key risks that are likely to, I'll expedite. I know time maybe is not on my side because I have to rush to the recommendations. So the key risks are inadequate budget allocation. We know that the 15.4% allocated in 2024 is good, in the sense that it is progressively going towards the 20% minimum budget, but we know that we need 20% according to the ZANEC and Cairo protocols. So we need to ensure that we raise this funding, and it is very possible. I have no doubt whatsoever that the country has capacity to raise more than 20%. See in our recommendations. Then high dependence on external hallmark of the right to education. We should not look elsewhere for funding towards education. Maybe lower level concerned to equip us with the relevant skills and knowledge required for us to really harness the potential of our resources, because they are also interested parties. They would rather come here and bring their equipment, partner with us. But if they see that we have equipment and we have the resources, they will have lost solution. Then the fluctuation of the costs, of course, we have seen the stabilization departure, which is appreciating, and we hope it will be long term. To know the challenges that were there in 2024. In terms of strategies that can be implemented to fast track the progress for implementation, we need to establish, we are recommending that there is need to establish a robust monitoring and evaluation framework to track progress, so that we can have feedback and be able to mitigate the gaps that we see on the way. We need also to engage private sector involvement to leverage additional resources and expertise. But in so doing, we need to be very careful to ensure that we do not make education too expensive, because the private sector would always want to have a markup, and when we work with them, we expect that the cost will be higher. Then we need to invest in training and capacity building for government officials and institutions involved in implementation. We need to explore diverse financing options, including public-private partnerships, international grants, and domestic source mobilization as the hallmark. Of course, what we are saying is that in terms of summary recommendations, we need to increase the budgetary allocations to 20%. There is need also to engage with cooperating partners such as the World Bank to expedite the construction of classrooms. A situation where we have money and money is not being spent, and the service is affecting the delivery of education in a huge way, I think it's something that we need not trivialize. We need to ensure that for the money that we have, we expedite its expenditure to provide service to our learners. The government should increase allocation to adult literacy, because this is important in terms of making our adults productive, and also appreciating the role of education and in turn be able to send children to school. More resources should be allocated to the promotion of inclusive education, since we are running an inclusive policy, so that we do not leave learners with disabilities behind. Then the issue of teacher deployment is something that we need to continue to bridge the gap in terms of the pupil-teacher ratio. And we also need to continue with the digital drive to ensure that our schools are able to use digital literacy skills to enhance learning. We need to introduce a levy that will help promote the development of education infrastructure countrywide. we know that this is the solution. We need to ring fence, our education funding, ensure we are able to, fund education regardless of an emergency that we are facing. The ministry should also ensure that both primary and secondary schools are disability friendly, with necessary equipment, assistive devices and technologies. If you go to Munali and you ask for Braille, they will ask you they don't have Braille. You can imagine the simplest of materials that we need to give our learners with disabilities, we are unable to procure them. But they report in schools, but they are not able to get the education that they need. And this is to ensure that it changes. We thank you, and this is the end of our presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Executive Director, for the submission right on time. Honourable members, any questions?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, let's start with Honourable Mutike, then Honourable Smush, in that order. Honourable Mutike.
Yeah, thank you very much, ZANEC, for your presentation, and we do appreciate it. This past weekend, I had the privilege of attending a UNICEF workshop on the rights of children, and the statistic that came out of there were very, very saddening, because statistics showed that 50%, almost 40.9% of children in Zambia experience at least 3 deprivations in areas of nutrition, in education, and water and sanitation. And you hinted on one here about menstrual hygiene, because a lot of our children, especially girl children, and more especially those in the rural areas, they struggle with these facilities and this, sometimes to menstrual hygiene. They don't even have ablution blocks to do these things, and the children will just drop out of school to say it's more embarrassing. They would rather get married than face this kind of challenges. To high rate of children, especially in the rural areas, dropping out of school. So it made me think, because upon inquiring, we realized that we don't have an integrated children development plan. We don't even know which ministry that can sit at the moment, because all these things are sort of like nutrition part, health, education. It will be sitting with the Minister of Minister of Education. So I was thinking an organization like yours should spearhead some of these things that need to happen to help our children to improve literacy levels, and to protect and give those rights to children. So I was trying to ask you, what role can you play in ensuring that we improve our statistics, especially at early childhood education? You saw we didn't meet a lot of our targets there. At primary and secondary, more focusing on a girl child, of course including boys, but a girl child, and especially those in the rural areas, because a lot of our children in the rural areas, when we talk about early childhood education, I think it's for more of the urban people, because they don't even have access to nurseries, those in the village setup, most rural areas. So what role can you play in ensuring that we develop those policies that ensure that even the child at the rural area can have access to early childhood education? Thank you.
Thank you. Honorable Smushi.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, ZANEC, for your presentation. I want to speak to the aspect of the teacher-pupil ratio. I think you touched on it. To speak it from the fact that we saw how this government tried to improve in terms of employment of teachers. But there's one problem that I think is still exists, which of course in a way again they try to solve it, where when employing, we are told to employ from the locals. You employ, if you are in Skongo, for example, where I come from, you are told to employ people from Skongo. But despite that, I think we still have a challenge where we have seen teachers being transferred from the rural areas to the urban areas. and as a result still creating the problem where we don't have enough teachers in the rural areas to give what I would term is quality education. So maybe I just wanted to find out, do you have something in form of solution to try and solve this problem? Because I think the issue of employing from the locals, I don't think it has really worked, or we can depend on it, because it has quite a number of challenges. Then finally, I think you mentioned something like, when you're talking about infrastructure, you talked about, you said that we have the resources. So I just wanted you maybe to expand on that, to what do you mean we have the resources in as far as the putting up infrastructure is concerned. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ZANEC.
Thank you so much for those questions. The first one, in terms of coordination mechanisms, that is a major problem actually. Now, when we look at the services of teachers, research has shown that there are 5 major services that a child requires to develop fully. One of them is the early childhood education as we know it. The second is nutrition. The third is health. The fourth is what we call responsive caregiving. The care that is given by the mothers, the love that the mother needs to give to the child is important for their development. The last one is security and safety. Ensuring that these children are protected from abuse, they are protected from child labor, lifting heavy loads and all that. All those are critical for the development of a child. But when you look at these services and you map them across the ministries, you will see that you will come up with 6 ministries that are involved. And each ministry is doing their small part. What is lacking is something that coordinates them, that brings them together. And what we have seen, and I've worked in government myself, what we have seen is that every ministry doesn't want to be coordinated by another ministry because they are at the same level. So what other countries have done, like Madagascar and Mauritius, that are doing very well in providing these services, is that they have moved these services to be coordinated by the Vice President's office, because they are able to convene these ministries easily. And this is what we've been advocating for. And this is what we are trying to push for as ZANEC, so that we can see, a coordinated way of delivering these services that are required for the full development of our children. Then in terms of the pupil-teacher ratio and the issue of localization, and members of Parliament, I think this is something that, and I think Parliament had done a research around the deployment of teachers, I think around 20, is it 18, thereabout, I can't remember, which is one of the, continue. Government recruited 30,000 teachers, but we have not, and this is very important to underline, we have not gotten the benefits of employing so many teachers because we have poorly distributed those teachers. And this issue of teachers, the law says teachers are supposed to be at a station without movement for at least 3 to 4 years, but now we are allowing them within 2 months to be able to move to go to urban areas. Is really undermining our efforts in teacher. All these pupil-teacher ratios you are seeing, we reported here 9:1, they are fake, because they don't represent what is on the ground. Some schools have no teachers altogether. They are using volunteers to teach. Yet their payrolls are full because some teachers were sent there and they are now moved from there with their own payroll. They are gone to urban areas, and when you want to replace, you can't replace because on paper the payroll is full, even if there are no teachers there. Until we address this, we will not get the benefits of recruiting teachers annually. I have always told the ministry that they can achieve greater impact by redistributing the teachers they have equally than employing 50,000 teachers. So that is something that we need to seriously address.
Now, sorry, honorable members, before we come on the board, just your last statement. You have given us very good teacher-pupil ratio in your report. Both at primary and the secondary have indicated that these have been met, because these are the milestones which are set in the 8th National Development Plan. But I like your last statement. I like it, but worrying. Where you are saying, obviously I know you are using a parliamentary language, that's why you say these are fake numbers. Or in short, this in Parliament will say we need to withdraw, but that is fine. Meaning what you have indicated here is not the correct position. That's what you are telling this committee, and then we get worried. Would have loved the situation is. My question is maybe where are you getting this? The source of the information. And maybe you needed to make basically cover it. Well, that's very important for this committee. So as much as it looks like this, and most of us here, the MPs, we come from rural constituencies, and definitely we are facing these issues. Where you find, you go to this primary school, they will tell you what is needed is 15 teachers. They only have 7. Okay, meaning already there is a problem. So it's not that we are disputing. Maybe we need to elaborate a bit more, especially in terms of the source of the information.
Yes, Chair, I withdraw the word fake, but let me explain what I mean. Now, averages can be very misleading. So averages, when we say, okay, so here, if you see in the 8th National Development Plan, the target was 5 learners to 1 teacher, but we remained at 9 learners to 1 teacher. Now, when you look at the fact that these are averages, you may think to every school you go to, you will find that the ratio is 9 pupils to 1. No, this is just simply an average. We have schools that have ratios of around 89 learners to 1 teacher. But when you put the average, there are others. Here in Lusaka, there are schools that have more teachers. You know, the average, where the average, for instance, would be, 3 learners to 1 teacher. Here in Lusaka. But you see that when we have an average, we will have to 9. Being oblivious of the extremes. So what I'm saying is that this number, the average, is oblivious of the extremes, both the upper extreme and the lower extreme that we have for us to come up with an average. So it's not something that applies to any school. But when you look at it, it looks good because it has been diluted by those schools with a good pupil-teacher ratio.
Thank you. Honorable Mavumba, then Mumba, in that order.
Thank you, Chair, for the opportunity. Maybe ZANEC, for me, if you look on page 19 of your recommendation 1 and then 7. In your recommendation 1, obviously you are talking about increasing budgetary allocation, but again, recognize the limited resources to the extent that even most of the targets for infrastructure development were not met. Now, what I want to learn from yourselves is that if we were to increase the budget for the Ministry of Education in the context of your proposal in 7, where you are talking about introduction of an education levy, in your own wisdom, how would this be implemented? What are your thoughts around it?
Okay. Honorable Mumba, you can take it to, sir.
Chairperson, good morning, and my concern was actually on the same levy, considering the fact that there seems to be all sorts of payments that are being made. You find you have got the loans board, when you get educated you owe. Then there's another levy that is being paid by companies
TVET? Is it for the TVET?
Yeah, for the TVET companies. So I wanted to understand what you meant, but Honorable Mabumba has put it there.
Okay.
Of course, but I also want to find out, you talked about schools with disabilities. One of the schools with disabilities are very few in Zambia. My constituency is lucky to have one, which is Mano Primary School. And one of the things that we have had with Mano Primary School is that usually when a child reaches grade 7, they would send them to Solwezi. There was another school in Solwezi. But I think that has changed. But the funding has been very, very poor. Many a time I have to chip in using my personal resources. So when you talked about the Brailles, I got interested. There was a request for that. Why is it so difficult that the Ministry of Education cannot have these things? In the past, I'm told, when there was Munali Secondary School, which was having children with disabilities, this was not a problem. Maybe what is your institution doing, and then maybe how can you work with my school in my constituency as well? Thank you.
Thank you. ZANEC?
Thank you, Chair. Quickly on the levy and how can we do that? We are going to share with the Secretariat our succinct research document around the education levy, which has looked at other countries and how they have managed to implement it and the shortcomings, trying to learn from there, which so we will share with the Secretariat also understand further. But really, for our context, it's a low-hanging fruit. It's something that we can do within a sitting of Parliament, because we have already the skills development levy, the law that, as Honorable Mumba said, that provides for the skills development levy. And in our proposal, we are saying we simply need to broaden the skills development levy into an education levy. Reason: the skills development levy looks at TVET. It is late there. The new curriculum needs to give these skills, the STEM skills, at a lower level to our children in primary education. You can't wait, you can't have only a fund that gives skills when people are old. They need to start lower, and this is why we want to broaden it. And also, you may wish to know that although it is 1% of the wage bill for companies that goes to skills development levy, we can broaden that further, because we know that our research has shown that if you check, our research has shown that we are losing on annual basis around $635 million in illicit financial flows and tax evasions by companies. So if we tightened that, we would get a lot of money that we can ring fence to give to education. We don't need to tax anyone. We simply need to make it difficult for people to evade tax. That is the only way, and evidence and research is there. Then in terms of skills for schools, for inclusive schools. Inclusion, by definition, when we say inclusive education, we are saying every child, regardless or disability, must get a quality education at their nearest school. That is what our policy provides for. Whatever it is, let them go to their nearest school and they should get a quality education. If when they go there, they can't get a quality education, then it is not inclusive policy that we are implementing. So the special education schools are not good practice. Good practice is for a child to go to the nearest school, and that school should provide everything for that child. That is what our policy prevents. Now, what is the problem? The problem, and what are we doing? I think some members of Parliament will attest that we are now having a campaign where we are pushing the ministry to elevate, to have a directorate of inclusive education within the ministry, so that when they sit to allocate resources, there is someone who represents children with special education needs. But for now, there is nothing. It's an important component, but it's not represented at the highest management level. in the ministry. And in our view, it is more important than some of the directorates that are still there. And we want this directorate to be there. So we have started collecting evidence, and we have started, involving the ministry in this process so that we push. Countries just like our neighbor Malawi. If you go to Malawi, you find the director of inclusive education in their ministry. And they have a budget. But here, there is no budget because there is no directorate. So when they are allocating resources, they don't think about them. And this is what we are pushing, and that's the work that is on the table for us now.
Thank you. Now, Director, if you look at your presentation on page number 2, looking at the budget, education budget performance, the 8th National Development Plan budget for 2024 is at 30 billion, isn't it?
Yes.
Then the 2024 annual budget is at 24 billion. Out of that 24 billion, 23 billion is released, which is about 95% of what was budgeted fund. Everything factor has been expended, which is good, meaning the bend rate is almost at 100%. You may not have the overall 8th National Development Plan targets, but if you look at the overall, what was planned for 2024 under the 8th National Development Plan is 171 billion. Then only out of that, in the 2024 budget, to meet these objectives, or the milestones, there's only 50.9 billion. You are the technical class. I know you may want to say, no, throw that to the ministry for those who do the budget formulation. But just from that, because this 8th National Development Plan is coming to an end in 2026, isn't it? Another one has to be developed, and this must speak to Vision 2030. But when you see these huge gaps, a direct question could be, does it mean that what the time of framing the budget, say for 2024, those framers of the budget, you are technical class, do they have time to look at these other documents? Because these documents speak to each other. They are done by the same people, you people. Okay, you come up with the 8th National Development Plan, you say, for example, under the education budget, come 2024, we are going to give 30 billion. Only 24 is given, meaning there's a gap already of 6 billion. From the 24 billion, again, only 23 is given. I don't know whether you're getting what I'm saying in terms of you technologies at this time. Are they alive to the fact that we have this commitment? And if you don't do this, then already for me, you start now wondering, are we going to achieve the vision in 2030? Because this is the driver for us to achieve that. That is my question number 1. Then on page number 7 of your report, the children with special education needs, isn't it? The target was to identify 10,000 special education needs learners. These are learners with disabilities, okay? And your aim is to develop an inclusive education system. You are saying this was not achieved, as only 2,205 were identified. So it's just like an issue of identifying. But also you made a comment to the effect that these children, most of the parents with disabilities, they are hiding them. Okay? We want to bring them on board, but the parents are hiding them. So I just want to find out from your end what is being done in terms of to ensure that this trend, because it's worrisome. We may not know the reasons, but what is being done to ensure that we overcome this challenge.
Thank you so much, Chair, for the 2 questions. First, on the disparities that the technocrats and the technocrats actually are the ones that are coming up with all the figures in the SNDP in terms of the targets for funding and also the actual annual budgets. Of course, I think what is important is to know that we have a medium-term expenditure framework that is that runs for 3 years, which is a guide to the budgets and also a guide to plans like these. Really, the problem that there is that as a country, what I've noticed myself is that we don't respect data. Everything we do is not evidence-based. It's not data-driven. So we would come up with these targets, and this is what I've seen even in the ministry. We would come up with very good figures to inform us about something. The next time we want to plan for, we forget about what the research told us. And that is what is happening. The second one is that we have been putting figures. We want figures to increase, but we are not increasing the measures on the revenue side of our budget. So if we say the budget has to go to revenue measures support us raising 30 billion to invest in education. So we have to do the revenue side as business as usual, but we expect money to be increasing. ZRA will not increase the money they are getting unless we give them leverage in terms of policies that can help them collect a lot more or from more people. So that correlation is not there. So we talk about the figures, we forget about the revenue side of the budget. Then in terms of identifying these children, I think the demand for education for learners with special education needs need to come from parents. Unfortunately, government is not better placed to do a campaign, and normally campaigns are handled more by civil society. It's unfortunate that we have civil society that is dealing with learners with special education needs and creating awareness on the need for them to access education, but there is not much support that those organizations actually are getting, and we will still continue to have this. But the other problem also is they will send their children if they know they are safe where they are going. You can see that most of our schools are not friendly. Even the University of Zambia itself, if someone has a wheelchair, you can have a problem to attend lectures, to go to the library, because the infrastructure and everything is not good. So sometimes that's what stops. Parents do not trust that if they entrust schools with their children, for instance, with physical disabilities, children who are deaf, children who are blind and deaf, they take them there. They are not sure. And also some require support in terms of someone working with them throughout, and that also leaves out. And this is why we need to fund them so adequately that they can benefit from free education, because for them free education doesn't remove all the barriers. The barriers still remain for some, because it is too costly for them to access quality education. So there's a lot, but the primary thing that can address, like I said, is can we elevate inclusive education to a level of a directorate in a ministry. Once that is done, then we will have at least someone at a higher level who is speaking for these children. Otherwise, as it is now, even the ministry has forgotten about these children, especially when they are budgeting. There are no lines that are, of course now they have a fund that they give to schools, to inclusive schools, but as we heard, it's not enough for the children.
Okay, thank you very much. Honourable members, any questions? We close. I don't see any hand. Honourable Mukosa.
Chair, I just wanted to hear the view of the witness on the issue of elevating the Directorate of Inclusive Education. Maybe it could be that the ministry is looking at the feasibility of achieving that, because already, I think even in your submissions, you have talked about how there has been underfunding in certain sectors and the departments. So I don't know if it can be possible for them. Maybe they have been thinking that there may be no financial support to meet the creation of a Directorate of Inclusive Education.
Any comment?
Yes, that's a very good one, always. they would say there's no money. But they have 16 directorates now. They have directorates like primary, secondary, tertiary. So when we look without, and when I've met them and they are seated, I've told them that there are directorates that are not important that are there. And in some of the directorates they have only 2 staff, the director and the assistant director. Really, I think when you look at inclusive education is going to cut across from ECE, primary, and secondary. That directorate will look at all this, and it has greater weight already. When you look at the structure, we will see that they don't have 16 directorates, but they have the Directorate of Inclusive Education. So this is what we are saying, that this directorate is so important that it shouldn't be relegated as the 17th important directorate. It should have been there a long time ago to be able to address these issues. So it's a matter of priority actually within the ministry. There are directorates there that if you evaluate, they've done nothing. Why? Because they are few. They don't have a plan and they don't have. But there is this directorate which has a lot of work and which requires resources, and we don't have it. So this is like the argument that that we are doing. Of course, we have done studies. Always we work with evidence. We are a research institution. So even on this, we have done research which we have put together, which we are presenting to the ministry.
Okay, a follow-up?
Yes,
Yeah,
Chair.
sure.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry for delaying the
that's fine.
committee. I think your submission, the one that you're making, is very, very important. So maybe I would like you to just enlighten us, for the sake of the committee, to learn and know. When you say there are some directorates which are not very, very relevant in the Ministry of Education, which ones are you referring to? Just for our information. Thank you.
Well, I will not mention them for fear of creating enemies. But they know that I know there are directorates that are not necessary.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, no, is also protected. Even if there is Cap 12, is also protected. Cap 12 applies here. When he goes out there, is on his own. Okay, Director, thank you very much with your team for this information and for appearing before this committee. So, Cap 12 of the laws of Zambia, in terms of the immunity, that which was given to you earlier on, also end here. Do have a good day. Thank you for coming. Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you so much for still being with us on Parliamentary television. Zambian National Education Coalition, ZANEC, have just made an appearance before the Planning and Budgeting Committee for the consideration of the 2024 Annual Progress Report on the implementation of the 8th National Development Plan. Just to make mention that this was the only witness for today. My name is Matimba Mkua. On sign language, I was joined by Chola Kauma and Jason Manda. On behalf of the entire production crew, keep watching Parliament Television. Good morning.